Hello everyone, welcome to another Rewind review. It's a bit wet here today, as you can see. Look, I can't do a full video like this. Can you stop the rain, please? Hello? The rain, can you turn it off, please? Look, I'll be back in a minute, just give me a second. Hang on, maybe we can talk through our feelings? Oh. Right. How do we do this? Not as hard as it looks, is it? Right, that should be sorted now. And now I present to you the power of editing. Okay, the rain is gone. I don't think we're going to be needing this coat anymore, so let's get rid of that. Okay, that feels better. Right, where were we? Hello everyone and welcome to another Rewind review. In this video, I'm taking a look at a movie that I have been desperate to do on this channel, and that is Se7en. Released in 1995, Se7en sees two detectives, a rookie and a veteran, hunt a serial killer who uses the 7 deadly sins as his motives. Written by Andrew Kevin Walker and directed by David Fincher, the movie stars Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, Gwyneth Paltrow, Kevin Spacey, Reg E. Cathey, Arlie Ermey and John C. McGinley. This is one of those films that's been on my movie bucket list for quite a few years now. I had never actually seen this before, much to everyone's surprise apparently. I was always aware of this movie. I do vaguely remember seeing posters for it everywhere when I was younger, but for some reason I just never got around to seeing it. And truthfully, it wasn't until Matt Reeves' The Batman in 2022 that this became a must-watch for me. Partly because of how many comparisons were being made between the two. Every review I watched would mention Se7en in some way, and every time it got brought up, I would constantly find myself going, oh, yeah, Se7en, of course. And it wasn't just a comparison, this movie was a direct influence on it. And because of how much I loved that movie, I was much more intrigued to see this. So, on its 30th anniversary, I decided to finally sit down and watch this. Was it worth the wait? Oh yes, this is one of the best detective movies I have ever seen. This was dark and twisty, it surprised me and disturbed me, and it kept me heavily invested in the mystery and questioning things. Put simply, I was hooked from start to finish. Se7en is a dark noir style detective thriller that follows two detectives, one at the end of his career and one taking on his first proper case. Together, they investigate a series of strange murders that all relate to one of the 7 deadly sins. And it's up to them to find out who is behind these horrific crimes, why they are happening, and try to stop them before more victims pile up. The basic plot of this movie is the simplest story that you can have for a detective movie. A serial killer is on the loose and two vastly different detectives have to work together to solve the case. And yes, it does have a few cliches that kind of come with the territory, but they're used and done in a way that feels fresh and keeps you engaged. The story, the characters, the mystery and the world, it's brilliant. It is so gripping. Now, seeing as though it has taken me a long time to actually getting around to see this movie, I've got to confess, I was aware of a few big things that do happen in this. Firstly, and I think that most people know this, if not and you don't want to know, here's your warning. I am trying to keep this as spoiler free as I can. I probably should have said that at the start. I'm not going to spoil how the movie ends or wraps up, but I do need to address one very important big thing. You still here? Okay. I knew who John Doe was and who was playing him, which at the time this movie was getting released, nobody knew he was in this. It was kept a big secret because they wanted it to be a surprise. But I think that most people know that he's in this by now. And I was also aware of one other thing in this. And I'll put it this way. I made the thumbnail for this video before I saw the film. What's in the box? It is something that I did find difficult to avoid, partly because it has been turned into a meme over the years and it has been referenced and spoofed in things that I have seen, so I was partially aware of that sequence. Even so, being aware of it, it didn't impact my enjoyment of the film. I mean, it would have been nice if I did get the chance to actually see this movie blind, but that is something that is difficult to achieve these days. But then again, I did somehow manage to avoid the big twist in Friday the 13th, so it is doable. But that said, I didn't know how that scene would play out or how it would wrap up. I had a pretty good guess though. Anyway, even though I was aware of the whole 7 deadly sins angle, I wasn't quite prepared for just how messed up the crime scenes would be. I'd heard about 2 of them before seeing this, but I didn't know too many details, and how all the sins would factor into the movie. These scenes are legitimately disturbing, but even with that said, and no matter how messed up they are, How those crime scenes are brought to life is very clever and very thought through, and it genuinely made me worried about the writer. Now, one thing that I did appreciate is the fact that you don't actually see any of the murders happening. All you see is the aftermath and the effect that it has on the people involved. One of the best performances in this movie is from Leyland Orser when he's recounting what happened to him. It paints a really horrific picture of what happened to him, and his performance is all you really need to be uncomfortable. Plus, the set design gives you all the clues you need to understand what happened. It puts you in the detective's shoes. It's a very smart way of doing this because it focuses on the horror and grotesqueness of what's happened. It doesn't try to potentially glorify the torture aspect like the Saw movies can. That is one thing that does put me off from seeing those movies and the Terrifier films as well. And I think that's partly why I enjoyed this as much as I did. It feels weird saying that. Even though they describe what happens to the victims, they let you fill in the gaps. Your mind paints a really disturbing image of what happened. And that's why this movie has a very well earned 18 certificate in the UK. They're all disturbing in different ways, and I think that some people will find some more disturbing than others. Honestly, I think the worst for me was gluttony. Not that I didn't find any of the other crime scenes quite nasty, but there was something about this one that just really got under my skin. Anyway, I have got to praise the makeup and production design though. There's some really impressive stuff in this. As I said, there is a lot of thought put into the set design and the overall look of each location, not just the crime scenes. It not only helps set the tone, but it also helps tell the story and showcase the world these characters live in. It's a really atmospheric movie overall, and the look helps sell that. It really captures the moody vibe. This movie is dark and gloomy, it's devoid of colour with very desaturated visuals. There's always something bad happening. There's lots of sirens in the distance which plays into the characters' psychological struggles. And of course, yes, it's almost always raining. I will admit, there is a scene quite early on in the movie where Mills and Somerset are having a conversation, and I did find it a little bit hard to understand everything they were saying due to the rain, but it was just in that one scene. There is some slightly noticeable ADR in a few sequences, but it's nothing distracting. Despite it being quite dark and suspenseful, it does have a few speckles of humour peppered throughout this, which I do think are appreciated. It gives you a few moments of levity, moments being the optimum word, and it's all done within character. This is a very serious movie that does deal with lots of very adult, very mature themes and ideas, so I do think that it is good how and where the humour is used in this. Seven is a really tense film, and it's constantly building up suspense as the mystery deepens even after John Doe is introduced. That car ride sequence is a masterclass in building up tension and uncertainty, and that manages to carry on through until the end. It's quite a slow burn film. The pacing for this movie is quite slow, and I will admit it does feel a little bit longer than it is. The runtime for this movie is 2 hours 7 minutes, and that really surprised me. But having said that, in my opinion, I do think that the overall pacing for this movie is perfect. It's never dull and it never drags. The story and the mystery are very investing, and as I said earlier, gripping. I could gladly sit through this movie with no complaints even if the runtime was over 3 hours long. And part of the reason for that is because the characters are just as interesting as the story. This has a really impressive cast. I was really surprised seeing how many actors I recognised in this. Just before the police raid, I had to do a double take and say, wait, is that Dr. Cox? I had no idea he was in this. And then, of course, there's also appearances from Reg E. Cathy, Arlie Ermey and Richard Schiff. None of them really have a significant role to play in the overall story, but I do think that how they are utilised within context of the story is excellent. And the performances from everyone involved are brilliant. But the main focus of Seven is on the two detectives. Detective Somerset, played by Morgan Freeman, and Detective Mills, played by Brad Pitt. I do feel like Somerset is the main character out of the two, but it is treated more like a two-hander, and I do think that both characters are excellent. Morgan Freeman is an absolute legend and such a perfect casting choice as Somerset. Honestly, I think this is a brilliant character overall, and he has definitely been doing this job for too long, and I love how that's showcased, even how the metronome is utilised. It's a subtle way of informing on character, and I like how it's used. But I like that he isn't just this hardened, world-weary officer. He's got a softer side as well, but he has kind of fallen into a state of apathy, which does tie into the plot later on and gives him an emotional connection with John Doe. Morgan is perfect in this role, and I love what he does. With Brad Pitt as Mills, this is quite different to most of the things I've seen him in. He's allowed to be much more dramatic, but he still utilises his natural charm and charisma as this hot-headed, cocky rookie detective that needs to be shown the ropes. I was quite surprised finding out that Denzel Washington was up for the role of Mills at one point in time, but unfortunately he turned the role down. Apparently the reason why is because he thought the demonic elements were a bit too much. It is a bit of a shame because the idea of a Morgan Freeman Denzel Washington detective movie, That sounds pretty awesome, but if he hadn't turned it down, would Brad Pitt have still had the career he had? Who knows? But David Fincher obviously liked working with him because he wouldn't have cast him in Fight Club. All of this is just a really long-winded way of me basically saying that Brad Pitt was perfectly cast. Mills is a perfect foil and contrast for Somerset and vice versa. It's a brilliant partnership that does play into the buddy cop formula, and their chemistry is excellent. And this is actually where Gwyneth Paltrow comes in as Mills' wife Tracy. She doesn't have the biggest amount of screen time, but she is a very important component in the story, partly because she is the one who gets Mills and Somerset to bond. And performance-wise, I think Gwyneth is fantastic. And then of course we have the one that the entire mystery centres around, John Doe, played by Kevin Spacey. He is this creepy individual with a really unsettling presence. But enough about Kevin Spacey, you knew it was coming. Look, what's happened with him in real life, it's wrong, I'm glad that it's out in the open, but that's not what I want to focus on. All I want to talk about is the character and performance. So let's do that. John Doe is not the most prominent character in this, but everything he does informs the plot. The entire mystery centres around him. He's built up over the course of this movie as this genuinely terrifying, unrestrained psychopath. And when he does finally appear, he lives up to those expectations, and he's really unsettling. He's very calm and methodical, talking very monotone, and I love how disconnected from everything he feels. It just adds to this really unnerving presence he has. He is a really unnerving, sadistic antagonist, and he is highly memorable. He looks pretty unassuming, but he's the one with all the power and all the answers. Any situation he's in control. And the performance from Kevin Spacey as John Doe is fantastic. I did wonder if this is where the name John Doe originates from, but I've looked into it and it isn't. Apparently it goes back to the 14th century, so definitely not. Anyway, and then lastly, the soundtrack from composer Howard Shore. The music that is used throughout this, including the song choices, is really good. It's quite a low-tone soundtrack, very subtle at times, but it adds a lot of atmosphere and tension. It may sound like something that you would find in a detective movie, but at times, it does sound more like something that you'd hear in a horror movie, which I do think is really suitable. I wouldn't say that there's anything too memorable about this, but even so, I do think that it is good, it sounds great, and I do think that it does add a lot to the film. Overall, there's not much to say. This is fantastic. The casting, the performances from everyone involved, the story, the tone, the cinematography, the music, the sound design, and of course the mystery itself. This was incredible. I can see some people saying that they find it a bit too slow or too dark, and I can understand where they would be coming from, but for me, I genuinely loved it. As weird as it sounds, this is one of the best detective movies I have ever seen. And even more impressive, this isn't based on anything or adapted from anything. This is completely original. This may not appeal to everyone, and it can be a bit disturbing at times, but I would honestly say this is a must-watch. It has taken me a long time to see this, but thankfully, it met and surpassed my expectations, and I am so glad that I finally got to see it. So with all that being said, my rating for 7, without question, has got to be a 10 out of 10. I haven't done a 10 out of 10 movie in a while, and it feels good. Maybe we'll have a few more by the end of the year. But until then, thank you very much for watching this video if you have. If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. If you have seen 7, let me know down in the comments what you think about it. Plus, if you have any suggestions for any future Rewind reviews you would like to see me do in the future, let me know down below. But until next time, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. See you guys.